To the second half of the day. It'll look a lot like the first half of the day. We thought it would be good to have some sessions where you just get to kick back and listen, but then hopefully have ideas for the next part, which is the conversation. So what I'm going to do is we're going to call this the shotgun approach. I will throw a ton of things that are kind of out there and happening in the world of education when it comes to technology. And hopefully that's a blessing and it helps us with the conversation to come. I will start with this, and that's anytime you talk about technology, and we kind of talked about this morning. There's a big challenge with technology, and I think it looks something like this. There's a huge spectrum on technology use, and I even know between the schools here, you have some real differences. On one end of the spectrum, you have complete and total digital abstinence. Kids will not look at a glowing screen all day, and that's healthy for them. And I'm painting this in the extreme, but I'll defend this in a second. The other end of the spectrum is complete digital overload. I don't want to deal with kids at all, so I will plunk them in front of a screen in the morning, and they need to stay in front of the screen all day. Both of these spectrums actually get practiced in the world of education. There are settings where they happen. You're going to be somewhere on the continuum in all likelihood. There's something in between the two. I'll also say, I think that there are benefits and losses to both ends of the spectrum. So I want to say this. So if you're leaning towards one side or the other, you will easily demonize the other side as bad. But there's some huge benefits on both sides of the spectrum. Digital abstinence, you already mentioned, like one of the major problems if you let kids have tech is they're looking at stuff on the tech that you don't want them looking at. So there's a proctoring and a mediating that gets solved instantly when you just take computers out of it. We also know with digital use that we know nothing about cognitive function around technology. We really don't. As a field, lots of people are studying it, but the research is small little case studies. I think this might be going on. There's a causation problem with any research in that area. We just don't know what technology is doing to the brain, but we see some indicators that it might not be good, right? Attention span is number one on that list. What is this doing to our kids' attention span? I know I used to read whole news articles. Now I just scroll through headlines. I mean, I know for myself it's changed my habits. So the abstinence side, let's develop the brain without things we don't know and the damage that it may or may not be doing as we get kids ready for life. It's okay to just start without technology. So there is that idea. The other piece of digital abstinence is that it helps with reading. That there is a correlational effect to the more technology they consume, the less able they are to just read and understand content without pictures. So think of it as if you grew up always reading books with pictures in it, you'd just get used to that. And technology is so easily integrates words with images. Even for adult reading, you've got pictures and advertisements and things like that. Not to mention moral proctoring of your kids, which we already mentioned. When you open up the internet, you open up all of the internet. And there are parental guides and things you can put on the website. What kids have proven to us over the last 30 years is none of that really works. If you can put a parental limit on that, they know how to take the parental limit off because there's got to be some way to access and do that. So they've created and built some tools for schools around that where you can start to do some of that, but none of it's very good because there's so much on the internet. Trying to proctor that with some sort of filter is extremely hard to do. China's having that problem. They're trying to proctor the internet for their whole country. They're simply not able to do it, which is great if you're an evangelist. It's not so great if you're trying to, keep things out of your country that you don't want your kids to look at, or any of your people. And that's a communist state with total 100% of control of what happens on the internet in their country. And you simply can't filter it all out. And so at some point, the digital abstinence thing solves a whole set of problems for schools. And if any of you lean towards this side, I just want to say I'm on your side. I agree with you. Now I'll flip over and take the other side. Digital overload is happening. As the homeschool, microschool, hybrid school market increases, there are whole schools that just buy their classes as a video class, plunk their kids in front of the screen and give them a recess break. And then they call it school. And you would say, well, if I lean over here, then that's easily demonized. But let me say some benefits to that. That's better than what's happening in a school system that's actively trying to promote values you don't agree with. At least you can control the values being taught. Because I can get a Liberty University or a BJU online or an Abeka online, and at least I'm controlling content in that kind of way. I can also then do it with a lower staff ratio or a lower teacher to student ratio. So if I'm using computers, I can mainstream or quicken or amplify the amount of kids I can handle in a school when some of them are off doing this. We had one school talking about Duolingo. You don't have to hire a language teacher when you can use Rosetta Stone or Duolingo easily. And that can be just when you're done with your work, go do your French. And any of, 30 or 40 other languages in there. So I can have kids learning Latvian if I want to. I can do more things because the digital options provide more options for courses, content that we can fill in, and we can fill a lot of gaps on that. In that sense, then the digital overload comes with a lot of benefits too. And the further you get down that spectrum, the more variability you have, the more flexibility you have on staffing, and the last but not least, you're actually preparing kids for a world where digital technologies are used across the board. In fact, if you talk to anybody in the trades right now, they say, what do you need to do to go into the trades? We've talked about that. And they'll immediately say, these kids think that they're not going to have to use computers, but they need to be able to do, if you want to go into manufacturing, you need to know how to use a CDC or a CAD system to create things and how to interact with that software. If you want to go into auto mechanics, most automobiles have computers you have to know how to repair. So every single one of the trades, maybe carpentry, but even carpentry, you got to use some of the software we're going to look at. So having some familiarity with digital tools, if your kid gets to age 18 and they've never used digital tools, you're sending them into the world utterly inequipped to do a lot of most of the professions that are out there right now. So as a school, as an educator, you're thinking, what's the right balance? And I know I've spent a lot of time on this, but it's important because I'm going to throw a bunch of ideas at you, and your response might be like, I don't want that much technology. And I just want you to know I respect that position. There's nothing wrong with it. In fact, I think there's a sliding scale. And one of the things at Portals that we recommend is 30 minutes a week per age of the child. So if they're 10 years old, that might be, or I'm sorry, what do you do this? That's not how we say it. How do we say it, hon? 30 minutes per year of life per week. So really limited. So even when they're age 10, that's 5 hours a week, which might be an hour a night for a 10-year-old, which gives you then 16 hours in a day where they're doing something other than a digital screen. But by the time they hit 18, maybe it's 9 hours a week. So some kind of balance, or how much do I want kids in front of screens to get them the tools they need, but also to teach them. An advantage of digital overload, because they're exposed to everything at some level, they're learning how to self-regulate their online behavior with a Christian adult in the room with them, or doing it alongside them, versus sending them off to college and then they're being taught by their roommate how to handle digital spaces. So big trade-off, lots of decisions to make, major areas. So when we talked about this day, it was like, Sean, just talk about some of that. So I'm not going to give you the rules for digital use. I'm going to ask you to use some discernment around this, but I am going to give you the questions. So we'll throw this up. Yes, I'll share this slideshow, but there's not much in the slideshow to share. It's going to be a lot of images here as we go on. I think when you as a school are designing for balance around digital media, I would, with kindergartners, start with like 0 technology or digital use, because we're assuming their parents are giving them some time. And as a school, we're just going to learn to read before we learn to read digital media. And then, so the how much question, we've talked about that. Room arrangement, to what degree are we going to do this? And what is your eye line to the screen, not theirs? So what they've seen in schools really easily is the round effect, or if you have a computer lab, the computers are all around the edges and the teacher's in the middle. In other words, there's no moment where the kid can see what's on the screen where an adult walking through can't easily see what's on the screen. For obvious reasons, that gives you some advantages. If the kid's back is to you and the screen is facing you, you can see what's going on very easily, even for up to 30, 40 kids in a room. But room arrangement's a big deal. Who gets to use it? How do you get to use it? Is this a reward system? Is it not? A lot of times people take like computer games and they make them a reward in the school setting. Well, if you finish all your work, you can go play Oregon Trail, right? And that was kind of a default when computers only had a few apps and you had to put a disk in. So there's only one thing you could do on that computer. But as things have moved online, well, that becomes a little different situation. And if it's a tool, is a tool the thing you play with? I know when I teach people to use woodworking tools in the shop, it is not when you're done with your work, you can go play with the bandsaw, right? We don't do that. But so when you're thinking about digital tools and what we actually want to use computers for in an educational setting, start thinking about it more like a tool instead of a game or a play space. Could be an easy way to start thinking about those rules in your school and how you're going to set that up. Security and whatnot. A lot of security companies are making an awful lot of money because they're going to play off your fear. If you don't have this very expensive set of controls around your computer, then you're going to have these problems as an educational institution, and you're going to have some issues with that. In reality, the security programs and protocols that get put in place, and there are a lot of them. If you're an administrator, you've probably looked into some of those things. You have to balance or think about how much money you're spending on that versus how much value you get out of it. And can kids still do things? Again, if you're working with having kids develop the balance, you're actually maybe looking for opportunities to teach or do remediation around technology. So you're waiting for them to make the mistakes you know they're going to make, and then you deal with it. Etiquette around digital things, again, huge bandwidth question mark or a conversation. And actually, as a school, going through these 6 questions could be a really valuable process. And when we get into our conversation this afternoon, coming back to some of these questions, like, okay, I want ideas around each of these things. I'll just pepper you with a couple on etiquette. Don't do anything in an online space that you wouldn't do face-to-face or for real. Online spaces create this no accountability situation, but having little basic sentiments like that, having a thing like people in the room take priority over digital things in the computer space. So when there's people in the building, we're with people. And having those kinds of norms in your school or how you talk to your kids has been really helpful across settings and for a lot of teachers and administrators. Thinking about how you talk about technology and how you work with it. And then what? And we're going to spend a large part, again, my shotgun approach is just showing you a boatload of ideas. I really liked Angela's talk this morning because I feel like you didn't just talk about discipleship, you gave at least 5 or 6 really cool ideas around how to do that in your school, which was valuable to me. So I hope at some level this gives you like a ton of interesting ideas to just talk about as a school. Are these things we want to take advantage of or things we want to think about or look at? Especially as you get into the older ages, middle school, high school, and you're thinking, are they prepared to go into the workplace? Are they prepared to use Office Suite or Google Suite tools in order to be effective in whatever they're going to do next in life? And I'm thinking wide range on that too. It's not just college prep. Let's say you're going to skip college and you're just going to go straight into starting your own business. Well, who's setting up your website? And how much do you want to pay for things like that? Starting your own business is really easy today. Cottage businesses are huge. As a school, we should be talking about that. But I want them to leave high school with the tools they need to go earn an income and to do it, which might make you be thinking about, well, why aren't we just doing that while they're in high school? Why don't they start their own business where they don't need an income? So by the time they're done with high school, they can kind of weigh out, is it worth going to this or doing that when I can make a living doing this right now? And that's the smallest of craft projects. If it's unique and it hits a niche, you have a huge market to go selling your little basic crafty things. So making them familiar with things like Etsy or Amazon Marketplace or Facebook Marketplace, that can be an actual job or career path for some of these kids. I would not, or I've never seen an example in education where people use media influencer as a career path where that's successful. A lot of times that takes kids down a seeking to please mentality, and they're going to be introduced. It's kind of like, I want to be an NBA basketball star, but you look at me and you think, Sean, that's not realistic. The influencer is kind of this generation's NBA basketball star. You know, you used to have every kid playing in the parking lot because they wanted to be a sports star and make $1 million, and that was the path to do it. Today, it's the media influencer thing. You don't have to introduce that career path to kids. they will find that path on their own based on the viewing habits that we see online. So taking each of those questions and then weighing it against the two spectrums. How much going from nothing to everything, room arrangement, trying different things out. Again, this isn't a yes or no kind of conversation. It's a where does our little slider bar land on each of these kinds of things. And I ran out of room, so I just chopped off the what part, but we'll spend more time on the what. Questions so far, or thoughts, or like immediate, like where I don't even want to hear the rest of this, or anything like that?
I think what you're teaching is very important.
Thanks, Julie.
I'm just saying.
Cool.
My husband and I have a company. It's called Rivertown Communications. And we develop training. My husband mostly. I help occasionally. But we employ instructional designers, graphic designers, you know, writers, actors, you know, and the product is a training on the web. So if you've ever had a job where you had to take a training, or even sometimes teacher training, and that would be the type of thing we develop. We have a videographer, script writers, you know, so it's much broader than just using a computer. So I'm pretty sure that that's the future, you know, as far as like the marketplace. Now that doesn't mean you won't need people to build buildings and, you know, wire electric outlets and things, but the world is moving towards online technology.
Yeah, especially the workplace.
Yeah, everywhere I go, people are talking about AI.
We'll talk about that too.
There's lots of development in that realm.
Mm-hmm.
So I really think it is honestly important for children to understand that in the context of you know, how do I make a contribution to society in my job?
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, by all means.
It's almost cliche now that they say, like, it used to be that you could get a job and stay in it for 30 years, but one of the indicators of today's era is the jobs that are there right now, don't expect them to be there in 10 years. That there's things replacing. So you've heard that a lot. So here's my attitude around it. I think God has given us a sound mind. And as believers, we have a significant advantage in this area because we have clarity of thought about what's right and wrong. And that clarity equips us when it comes to browsing patterns, searching patterns, use of AI, to have some moral framework around how and what we do with computers. But our kids don't have that. It has to get taught at some level or training. You remind me, Julie, too, that my son decided he wanted to drive large trucks. So he went to work for a bus company. Guess where all his training was? Right? It was only the very final part where he actually sat behind a wheel. Everything else was online learning. And so a lot of the workplaces are going to those kind of video tutorials and instructional design pieces. So here's what we're going to do for the rest of the time. Again, not everything here is going to be for everybody here, but some of them might be for some of you. And then you're going, oh, that was a really cool idea. And if you leave the summit here today and you have some great ideas, it's good. I'm going to start with easy, low-hanging fruit. Office Suite and Office Tools. They're free with Google. Microsoft, it usually comes with a computer and that sort of piece. There's, okay, two ends of the spectrum. One, if it says it's free, there's always a cost. And just teaching your kids that. When you get a free resource online, they own everything. And they own everything you do. They're taking your information and they're selling it. That's how they make their money. There's no such thing as a free online resource. There might be an introductory period where they want you to pay later. But like with Google, if it's truly free, they're tracking all of this. What are they doing with all the data? Either they're selling your personal data or they're popping it into their AI systems. And they're using mass data sets in order to support people that are doing things. So when you go into AI and you say, write me a job description for a chair maker, it's going out and looking at what every chair maker that has used Google, it's combining all that data and taking all the things it can find, and they're giving you a sample. So it is the collective thinking of everyone in that area. So if you use Google Drive or Microsoft or what's the Apple one, iCloud, they are farming everything you put into those online things. And they've done a lot over the last 10 years to get you to use online storage. They don't want it in a disk on your desk. They want it in their ownership so they can use it and farm it, and they can kick that back out to people. There's a ton of value in this. Google is not going broke, but their users use all these free products. So how are they making billions of dollars? This is how they're doing it. So just knowing that. On the other side, does your kid end high school knowing how to use a shared calendar? Do they know how to do blind CC versus private emails? Do they know how to set up filters on their email system? Do they know how to report spam? Do they even know what spam looks like? Like when you get a spam email, do you show that to your teenagers and say, look at this email, tell me what you think? Because that's an amazing learning opportunity that they're not getting in most educational settings. They're never learning what that looks like. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry to send people spam emails and get them to give them their bank information. There is an art form to it. You know what I'm talking about, right? Right. There's a word for it, right? But what it is ignorant kids and ignorant senior citizens are the two primary markets for that. Right before we got married, I was a sucker for this, but it used to be in the mail. I got this thing going. If you only buy this little thing of cosmetics, you can get a free trip to Florida. And I was like, that's great. And I signed up for it and paid them their $200, and I got my $20 thing of cosmetics, and then found out I didn't qualify for the Florida trip. And I was like, oh. So I called up some of my mentors, and what do I do? What is this? And they were like, how much did you give them? It's like $200. And they're like, that was a cheap lesson in life. There's a sucker made every minute, but why does it need to be our students? Like coaching them on some of the email etiquette and things like that are there. Can they gather and organize their life using digital tools? This doesn't start digital. This starts with elementary kids using paper and pencil, right? Do some of these things in tactile ways and have planning for the day. What do we have on our agenda for the day, kids? What are we going to get done? And the kids know the agenda as they're going through the day and how are they doing it. But by middle school, high school, these can be shared to-do lists that you use with your kids. But you're also teaching them how to operate in many, many office-style workplaces. Can they present their ideas in more than just an oral presentation? And again, it doesn't, do you need to know how to graph a pie chart and use a compass? And no, we have digital tools for that today. So some things are changing, but can they, at the very least, show their ideas through multimedia presentations by the time they finish high school? And again, this starts with pen and paper. Start it with tag board and foam core board, but by the time they're hitting middle school and high school, are they using tools or trying tools out? And again, I use the word tools. I'll talk about games in a bit. But these kinds of skills, again, they're really low-hanging fruit. If you go off to college and you don't know how to do some of these things, you won't be able to interact with some of your professors. Like there are professors and trade schools where this is how they operate. And so we want them ready for those environments when they get there. Office 365, Jira, some of these other kinds of things, project management software. And again, I know I'm talking to some, like my generation, like, Danielle's here, she can laugh at the efforts the younger people have made to try to get me to use project management software. But I can feel myself getting crusty on this a little bit. Do your students know how to interact with, as a user or as an employee, but also as a boss on a project? Can they use project management software? And are they familiar with even one of them? The great part about technology is if you can use one, you can, with very small adjustments, use everything in the genre. So if you learn, you don't have to teach 5 different project management softwares. As a school, you can kind of pick one. But even having a week or a unit in high school where you talk about that, show that to them, not a bad thing to at least be exposed to. So when they get their first job and they're like, well, you need to log into the project management software and all your assignments come through that. And then we only meet for a SCORM meeting for 10 minutes a week. But everything else is interacted through these systems. Well, that can become quite an endeavor if you've never looked at one before. So in the same way, I think growing up, like we had to learn how to use calculators. Like these are tools of the trade. And they're in trades in a number of different workplace kinds of settings. I'll talk about this a little bit. Sometimes I think, especially with Gen X or even like millennial aged, There's a lack of knowledge about the kinds of browsers available and what's out there. So let me just, at a show of hands, like, could you tell me, could you pick 4 of these and tell me the differences between them? How many people in the room? I got 1. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a sampling on this. This is a big thing. Google, Mozilla, Safari, the top 3, they take all your data and use it and whatnot. Some of these other ones have subscriptions or use rates, but if you're paying for it up front, you're probably not getting your data farmed. Some of them just provide a free service, like Brave is kind of a, not only will we help to filter what comes through your searches naturally, but we're not going to sell or use your data, and that's in their user agreements. Do your students know what a EULA is? An end user license agreement. Have they ever looked at one and seen what it is? Former lawyers might enjoy this. You should be familiar with EULAs and what they are and what that means. And if you're doing a literature class or a start your own business class or any kind of course, you should understand. I learned these the hard way when I tried to take a URL that I thought I owned off of a website productions, and then I realized, oh no, the website production site owns my URL. Well, I had to go out and get my own URL. But that was all in the small print in the end user license agreement, the EULA. So that might be something where you're thinking about our middle school, high school curriculum, like take one day of a school year and just say, we're going to have a EULA day. And then you can have fun with it too. You can make your own end user license agreement for anybody that wants to come to your lemonade stand. You drink this lemonade, what do we own of your life because you drank our lemonade? And see if they can get clever about coming up with ways to own people. And middle schoolers will eat that right up. So just a piece of that. Also kind of browsing support for schools. DuckDuckGo is phenomenal. If you're not familiar with DuckDuckGo, it's a attachment you put on to, say, a Google Chrome web browser. So you get the power of Google, but instead of going through your home internet system, it goes through DuckDuckGo and then back to you. And DuckDuckGo really is just kind of a filter for content, a base level filter, and it's free. So you're not paying for some system from an outside source. Wikipedia, take it or leave it. I know some conservatives that think it leans pretty far left. It is also filtered. So if you're doing research projects or having your kids out trying to find information, Wikipedia has done a fairly nice job of keeping that content fairly clean. However, they're going to look up their favorite musical artist. They're going to go through there. But one of the things you can easily set up in your school is if we're doing research, everybody's on Wikipedia. If the screens face you, you can look around the room and see that little globe in the top corner of the screen. It's very easy to know if they've left Wikipedia or not because the interface looks the same. I hope this is helpful. Are you getting anything in the shotgun approach so far? Okay, good. Moving on to phones. Social media is a big deal. Most educational settings basically ask the kids, no social media. So they're on this side of the spectrum. We're not going to do social media here at the school. Some schools even have a basket by the door where you can take your mobile device and dump it in the basket. They're getting a ton of pushback from the parents. The parents are like, if there's an emergency and I need to talk to my kid, I will talk to my kid. And it is not your job to take those phones away. So you're seeing conflict that is part of cultural change. How are we going to do this? How are we going to organize this? Do kids know how to ignore a text? Have fun with this. You can make this a fun classroom experience. If the kids do have phones, school rule is the administrator of our school has all of your phone numbers and then text them in the middle of class. And if they answer you, come on down to the office. You need to learn to ignore your texts. You need to learn to just glance and put it away. And so you can start to learn those skills by creatively and positively approaching it as a group of adults. There have been some problems, major problems, with teachers sharing social media with their students. And the government schools have figured this out, and they've told their teachers, do not have a friendship with kids on Facebook or whatnot. LinkedIn might be a different kind of situation. Say you're running a senior level business class, you want to introduce them to networking and LinkedIn, a little more proctored. But a lot of the problems with teacher-student relationships that are happening today, they start with private conversations in text or Facebook or Twitter or something like that, where the adults do not have the boundaries that they should have with the kids, and they get out of control. So once a year we see a news story like that pop up, and it's pretty tragic. Teacher loses their career. As administrators, no teachers friend any of our students until after graduation, period. If that happens, put it into your job agreements with your teachers. That happens, it's automatic dismissal from our school. Just, again, as Christians, be above reproach on that stuff. Just stay away from it. Students try to friend teachers. The answer from the teacher is no, thank you. Don't accept that friend request. But administrators, that can be a tool that you use. And you can have those kinds of situations. So again, which end of the spectrum and where is your school going to set that slider bar? And how are you going to do this? Social media has been really effective amongst the homeschool community where they do have more proctoring of the tools, because now I want my kid to know how to use an appropriate use of social media. So how do I speak to people online? What's the etiquette? How do I be Christ-like in my social media spaces? What do I put up as a profile, and how do I present myself to the world? Good conversations to have before they finish high school. One of the things we did in the teacher ed program at Bethel, Mandy, you might remember this. Every graduating senior college student had to come in and sit down with me, and I had 10 minutes to find anything I wanted to find on those prospective teachers. And it was a private conversation because I often found things online that I should not have found. And I like to think that part of our training process actually helped our students get jobs. Because even though they're not supposed to do it, every administrator is searching Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn to see what kind of person they're about to hire. So how do you present yourself online? What photographs of yourself do you put up online? Right? And that's one of those things where we even have politicians that haven't figured this out. Anything you've ever put up online, people can find it. So think about what you're going to put online and where you're going to do it. If you expect them to learn that in college, you'll find that they have troubles, because even at a Christian institution like Bethel, I would say half of my students, I found something that would make it so I wouldn't want to hire them. Drinking parties, things like that, photographs that they would put up on Facebook and share with their buddies. And they would even label each other's faces and put names with it. And you're just like, what are you thinking? What are you doing? Why would you go to a party where people are dressing like that? I don't want to put that person with elementary age kids, and it would get in the way of their job thing. Thankfully, and I was really happy to see this, I'd say around half my students had perfectly clean, they had been taught. Somebody told them. And it was clear. I could search all I wanted and I couldn't find anything on them. And I would just be like, good job, well done. And those are conversations I think that need to start happening with like high school seniors right now, so that they know when they go off to college to be thinking about their online presence and what that looks like. So social media. Here's another upside. I think, again, the homeschool movement's a little more common with this. Using social media to talk to people that don't live by you that you love. Like having a video call with grandpa and grandma, doing digital field trips where I interview people. So there's some things that aren't in your hometown, like a steel mill. Well, I still want to know what it's like to work in a steel mill. Why not contact a floor manager that works in Pittsburgh, and they can walk you around the steel mill and talk to you with people. So you can kind of do digital field trips with social media and with like live chat or video chat sessions. So there's some of that going on. This is some of my favorite. We talked about this a little bit. You can learn how to do anything if you even know how to find YouTube and search for tutorials. So it doesn't matter how obscure the hobby is. If you're doing something at your school, say where you have quests, like every kid gets to pick a quest for the year, and the kid says, I want to learn quilting, and you got nobody at your school that knows how to do quilting, that should not stop you as a school anymore. There are resources, and again, this is how long do you want to plunk a kid in front of a screen? Well, if they want to start producing music, let me help them find tools that can do this. And again, AI is really helpful with this. Find me great, family-friendly, safe tutorials for music production. And it'll be like, do you want free ones or for pay ones? Please, the free ones. And then it'll give you a list of 2 or 3 great online resources that will train you in on how to do sound production in a music studio, how to do quilting, basically anything. So you can find those resources and actually make courses out of that really easily. Frankly, Portals is built on this. Like, we're building lesson plans using resources that are out there. Art is probably the best one. So I threw in the watercolor. Every artist in the world, typically they've made their money by selling their art. But most artists today also have tutorials on how to do their art. So whatever the art or craft is, that's a side revenue for them, even if they have a small number of people signing up for $10 classes. Well, they're all over the place. So you can pick the art style you want to learn and actually build out art programming in your school. And again, doing it with proctoring or having the materials there, you're teaching kids how to learn anything. And that's the point of education. I don't want to just teach my kids, I want to teach them how to learn. So when they leave my classroom, I've worked myself out of a job. They're able to go learn anything they want. And you've taught them how to do it. That takes focus, and some of you have already talked about attention spans. Digital technology can actually also help with attention spans if you're using the right tools. Like if you're just doing video games that are cranking things a million miles a second, attention span will go down. But if you're doing tutorials, attention span can actually increase, and there's been some studies on that showing that the tools you're using do have an effect on the cognitive impact. So learning how to paint is I got to focus, I got a canvas right here, I can pause it, do it, play it, start it, and this is how you learn how to do everything from fixing a sink to fixing a rocket ship. So you can find it out there and you can learn about it. There's also one, and I'll throw this isn't in the slide, so Charisma on Command. Some of you have had kids that have social skill issues. Charisma on Command, and I'm trying to look at a few of these to help with my own charisma, does basic how to have conversations, how to be kind, how to have etiquette. They even have a whole chapter on how to romance somebody or be respectful with the opposite gender. It is a secular kind of broad tent thing, but if you've really got kids where they just don't get some of the social skills, sometimes they just need to be told. And the Charisma on Can will tell, it'll give video examples of where that shows up in actual conversations, and then it'll actually like give you some like worksheet, like go try this in your real life and go do it. So wonderful set of tools, and again, just the amount of tutorials that are out there is really phenomenal. I'll also talk about this with mobile devices or phones. Phones can actually unlock real-world spaces with interesting layers. So if you haven't seen Leaf Snap or WeBird or some of these kinds of apps, they can change how you actually see the natural world too. So if you do a lot of hiking, park things, geocaching, if you've heard of that, can really add a dimension to going for a hike or going out in the woods. It's really fun for kids. And you can kind of build out, this is back in my days when I was doing development things, we would build these kinds of things for a lot of different proctored spaces. If the space has things in it that don't necessarily move, and with video recognition, they could even move a little bit now, but you can add tutorials and tours to spaces like art galleries. The Historical Society has this with some of the exhibits they have. The Science Museum has some of this built in. But a lot of these museums and spaces, they're hiring teams to come in and layer games on top of this physical space, which when you're looking for just making, if the point is I want my kids to engage, a lot of the state parks, national parks, they all have these kinds of tools and techniques here. Here's one of them. This is the Statue of Liberty. You know you can go up into the Statue of Liberty from the comfort of your classroom. And so you can have all these kind of unique tours, unique kind of walkthroughs where you get to go behind the scenes and do things you couldn't do. I'll show you another one here when we get to the next part, but I'm throwing it into the gaming section. So again, with phones, you can throw them in a bin when they walk in the door, but when you do that, you're not preparing them for life at the older levels, and you might be missing some pretty cool opportunities where you might want to take the phones out of the bin for a little bit during the day. And in that, you're getting some controlled exposure to digital technologies. Okay, so I'll go right here because this started as Yellowstone National Park. There's about half of Yellowstone National Park that humans don't get to go into. It's just reserved. They don't even let, like even the what do you call the people that run the park? The rangers don't even get to really go in this area. It's just open to the wolf population and other folks there. Well, they did map it, the whole thing digitally, so you can go into that part of the park that you can't go to in person, but you can access that digitally. And WolfQuest, they were like, well, how about we don't just have them walk around that part of the park? How about we let them be wolves? So you get to be a wolf. They added puppies in 2.0. You could add your own wolf family and make puppies. And this has been an absolute rock star hit for elementary school. But you're actually walking around kind of digitally mediated spaces where you get to see parts of the park and look at it and also think about like territory. You can go into wolf view where you get to see the odor of people's urination everywhere you go. It's all color coded and you can follow trails and hunt things down because you need food for your puppies. So they do keep it PG. When you kill the deer, it's not as graphic as in real life, but it is hunting, finding mates, and making sure you know where your puppies are as a game. For older kids, the idea of a digitally mediated space, and quite frankly, this is part of the draw of computer games. I can go places in a computer game that I just can't go in real life. This might be a problem on one side of the spectrum in that kids are leading very proctored lives right now. When I was a kid, after school, if I didn't show up till supper time, my parents didn't blink an eye. In fact, there was a rule, and there's a whole book titled this, when the street lights go on, it's time to come home. And so there was a safer United States culture back then. They didn't worry about what was happening to kids, but you had freedom. You had unsupervised time as a kid. Kids today just generally don't have that. And so then you wonder why they're not growing up. It's, well, they've never been given unsupervised time. What the game makers have discovered is if I can give kids a space, or what they call as a sandbox, if I can give them a digital sandbox where they can do anything they want to do, they will flock to that space. And that has captured this generation of kids. The computer game consumption by this generation is greater than music, radio, television, and movies combined. The media of this generation is not the movie theater, it is the computer game. Why? Because I can go to, well, that's Sherlock Holmes. I can be Sherlock Holmes. I don't have to just read them in my classrooms. I can go be Sherlock Holmes. Well, for a literature teacher, that's an opportunity or it's a threat, depending on where you're at on that spectrum. I can go around the wild Great West before it got settled, and I can see the entire Western United States mediated, and I can ride around on my pony and go experience it just like back in the day. They have mapped the ancient world, and Ubisoft hires historians to get this as accurate as possible. Clothing, outfits, architectural designs, they use original schematics as much as they can to recreate ancient Japan, ancient Middle East. This is Greece, ancient Greece. And this one I think is interesting. Black Flag is the game. I get to be a pirate during the colonial era. There's actually like 4 different games where you get to be a pirate. It's a popular genre. This one's rooted in history as much as it can be. You get to meet all the characters from that period of time, as with the other settings. But the ship models that they use, they took actual records out of the archives and digitally built the ship as they would have been made in real life. So when you walk around these boats and you're on them and you're sailing them, they're actually fairly true to original historical design. Think of learning history by actually playing out the Revolutionary War, not just necessarily reading a book about it. And this is the sort of thing kids do for fun. I just want to point that out. These are well-designed, proctored experiences. The content in them isn't something that parents might want to read the parental review on it beforehand. But I can actually learn a ton about this. They started to discover that the researchers started to tune into this when they had kids come into their classroom as middle schoolers and they knew everything about the colonial era or the Roman Empire or the Greeks. And they're like, how do you know all these terms, vocabulary, ideas, characters, and events? And they're like, well, I played this game. And these games aren't just 10-hour games. These are 80-hour games. Some of them even up to 100 and 120 hours of playtime. A class in a typical school year would be 180 hours. Some of these games get played for 300 to 400 hours over the course of 2 years. They're more than a class amount of content. And so they learn them. What's down is when what they're learning is about different kinds of orcs, which are fantasy characters. As adults, we're like, well, that's irrelevant information. But if I pick the right games, they're learning everything about, say, World War II. And now we're talking about information that we call relevant because we do it in a history class. So these are things to weigh out as educators today, is like, how can we be exposed to this? Project management, how about you just make them city planners? And you say, we're going to spend 10 hours in Sim City, and whoever gets the highest population wins, I don't know, whatever you want to win. Make it a competition and have fun so that the focus of what you're doing is there. This is what's called a complex semiotic system. Adults or non-gamers will look at this and go, I don't know how to figure this out. There's too much information here. Yet this is what it takes to operate a business. You are spinning a lot of plates. You are managing a lot of information flows and ins and outs. And computers can manage that very quickly. You can manage whole empires and civilization. This is a game called Civilization. I can manage farming, mining, trying to build world wonders, and have all these different mechanics that are going on at the same time. And I'm learning how to manage a complex system. Now, let's say I go home and I do that for 2 hours a night because my parents let me have 2 hours of game time. If I'm managing empires for 2 hours a night, and you come back to school and we're deconstructing a sentence, which one is cognitively more stimulating? And this is a question I have as a research. Maybe it's not ADHD. Maybe it's that the curriculum's too slow and too boring, and it's not complex enough. And what they're being asked or trained to do, because these computer games assume you know nothing, they train you in the course of an evening how to manage a complex semiotic system. And yet in schools, sometimes we want to stay away from anything that's too complex. Games are very good at letting kids fail. And this is something that's been critiqued for 40 years in education. Do you give every kid a blue ribbon, or do you acknowledge success, thriving, and hard work? Games only recognize achievement. And they have fun when you fail. They don't make it a big red letter F on your paper. They're like, oh, you screwed up. That was huge. Do you want to try again? And they make the downtime of failure very, very small and inconsequential, and the uptime of success a big achievement and badge. They know how to do it because they've studied it. A lot of the research actually came from gambling casinos. Take that for what you will. If you want people to keep playing, you minimize the failure, you maximize the success. So when they leave the room, all they remember is when they won, and they forget about the 50 times they failed. So that psychology and mechanic has been built into a number of these games. For adults, we might see that as a huge threat. Depending on which games they're playing, that could also be skill building. The other thing is, when you play enough of these games, you start to realize they're all fixed. So the gambling industry is seeing a lower and lower population of young people go into it because they realize it's fixed because they've been playing enough of it to figure that out. So gaming. And again, if we have questions during our conversation this afternoon and you want ideas for subject areas, this is one of my favorite games to play with middle schoolers and high schoolers. You name the subject and the age level, I think I can name for you games that you could take a look at, especially if they're struggling in that area. So doing stuff, digital tools. You might notice I've saved the most significant popular game of our generation, and I have not mentioned it, which is Minecraft. Yeah. Here's if you don't know Minecraft at all, and you have a notebook in front of you, Minecraft is a digital notebook. It's a blank slate. You can do anything you want with it. You can pick up any little block and you can put it anywhere else, which means it's the ultimate Lego set, and you never run out of Legos, and you always have the color Lego that you want for what you're doing. That is the core, what in the games industry it's called a mechanic. That's the core mechanic of Minecraft. It is a full sandbox with no conditions. You can even turn off, in creative mode, you can turn off all monsters, and you can just do creative mode. Well, in creative mode, you can do a lot of different things. So this is one of the areas, I researched this for about 3 years, interviewed teacher after teacher after teacher, and collected about 40 teachers' stories that used Minecraft for learning in the classroom. And they used it very successfully, and they'd never go back. And I tried to get teachers from every subject area and every grade level. So how and what are we doing with this? Well, at the higher levels, instead of studying the digestive system with two-dimensional pictures and text, they would have the kids go build the digestive system. Make me a body, and I get to be a little person that runs through the body and label each of the parts of the digestive system. There are electrical systems in Minecraft, they call it redstone, where I can actually program, I can make a computer with simple on-off switches in Minecraft. And so some of these, again, what you can do here is from simple to complex. Making wonders of the world, interacting or creating scenes or movies. So you can have a skit in the classroom in person, but you can also have small groups of kids make skits of very historical events. And you can have the characters talking and do the voiceover by combining a set of tools when you do this. They even have one app where you can take an object out of Minecraft that you've built, map an area of the floor, and then walk your phone around it and use it as AI, where I can do a, one teacher did, they had a gymnasium, and when you looked at the gymnasium, there was nothing in it, but little colored tape things on the floor. And each kid got a square, and they had their exhibit or their display or their fair night for their parents. But the parent could only see what was built by looking through the camera, but it was three-dimensional. You could walk around the Eiffel Tower and look at it in all its detail, and it was all augmented reality. So Minecraft starts easy, and it has unending things. If you have Minecraft players, they do modding. Modification is what that's short for. But I can modify Minecraft to have various features and things that I want as an educator. Microsoft bought it, most expensive game purchase ever. 10 years after the game was made, most games kind of go down in value. They get like movies, they hit the theater and then they stop making money. But it was bought for $1 billion. And that's because Minecraft recognized this isn't going away. This is a notebook in a digital space. It has unending possibilities from literature, history, science, all the different areas. If a kid's struggling with math and you don't have enough manipulatives, you can open up Minecraft and say, make me the multiplication tables. Build it so I can see it. And they will go nuts, and they'll be like, ooh, how long do I get? And in that sense, you're not struggling because it should go there. Rules around this are really difficult because it's so new, right? Time limits is one thing. If kids are building with each other, one of the things in the research that popped out was like, kids will do things in Minecraft that are as socially dysfunctional as what they do out on the playground. So it creates situations to talk about, how do we treat each other? Is it okay to tunnel underneath somebody's construction and then plant TNT blocks and blow up their thing from underneath? The answer is no, that's entirely inappropriate, but they'll think it's funny until you have that conversation with them. So there's pieces like that. I'm gonna move off of this though, that's a longer conversation. If they do Minecraft, you can easily shift them over to more professional tools. If they can build a thing here, they can build something in a garden planner and start to learn landscaping design. Same thing when it comes to floor planning or interior decorating. This room was laid out on an interior decorating piece of software before we finally decided where we had room and where we could put things. So you can start teaching that. And again, the tools here aren't a lot different from what you might find in a Minecraft. Minecraft is just a simpler version. Same software you can use for floor planning. Chief Architect is a piece of software. You not only can design very unique, special things, but then you can hit print and get a building list and go get your lumber. In fact, you can send the building list directly to the lumber supplier and have them order it up. So again, introducing these things to people that want to do this kind of work. And then that gets to this, what I would say is maturing the skill. One of the goals for educators that successfully use technology, okay, we can play here for a while, but then I want to play with more complex tools as they get older. How do I do that? Part of it is you knowing what the next level is. And again, AI is great for this. My kid plays with Minecraft. What would be the next more complex piece of software that would do X, Y, or Z? And AI can start pointing you in those directions really easy. So what are the educational uses? What's immersive? What's the kid into? How do I give them broader exposure and access to tools that might lead to a career? And how do I do that, and what's the learning curve on this? I'm just going to do one example of this. A great tool or software application for me is one that starts easy, but without leaving the tool, I can get to professional level things. Google SketchUp is free. This is a screenshot of the most basic thing you can do, make a box. Right? I can do this with elementary kids. Without leaving the software, that box can turn into home decoration or home design or architecture. Without leaving the software, notice I'm just adding a few tools. So I go here, but I can start to skin the white panels and throw in textures and graphics, and I can suddenly start get to architectural design, garden landscaping layout, a ton of three-dimensional space kinds of things. And again, if they love Minecraft, this isn't a big leap. But now I'm using tools where I can export things out of Google SketchUp and make use of it in the real world. I can have entire competitions on home design at my school as a major kind of project if I want them introduced to these things. I can put them in teams where they're working together and working on the same project because Google is shared software. So it's flexible for that. Moreover, I can even do history class. So I can start with, if this is something my kids are into and they get built out on it, start taking some of the great architecture of the world and having them recreate and rethink. Imitation is learning. So let's do the Hagia Sophia next, because that's not hard enough. And they can keep building and doing it. If they can functionally do this, career paths just opened up in a number of directions. You talked about how you hire graphic designers. Does it matter if they even finished high school or not? No. If they can do the thing, right, it's a job. Right. The designer of our graphic logo, is she even done with college yet? I don't care that she's done with college or not. She took the job, I paid her money. So she's got a business up and running. And so when your kids are doing this kind of work, it is not unreasonable to think they could put their products up, Amazon Marketplace, Etsy, some of those places, and actually start making money and funding. You could do this as a school fundraiser. Like, we are doing logo design and we're opening it up to anybody in our community that wants logo design for a new business. And then you use something like Google SketchUp. Canva is great for graphic design, right, Danny? And you start using some of the tools that are out there so they can build their own products. This doesn't stop in those trades either. I'm just going to show you. There is software to do auto mechanics, even though you don't have the money to open an auto mechanics shop. There's no reason they can't start learning vocabulary and basic auto engine repair things. They can also soup up a digital car in a way that you would never pay for in real life. This next one's a little graphic. Get ready. You can learn dentistry, orthopedics, medical treatment. If you have $15,000, you can even buy iStan, which is a giant full-size human being that you can do surgery on. They use that in medical school. The beautiful part about some of these technologies and tools is that they are available. There's a surgeon simulator on Steam, which you're like a surgeon for the mob, so it's a little off color, but they reward bad mistakes. If you kill the patient, blood sprays everywhere. Again, I know in a Christian market that might be over on the I'm offended, no way are we doing that, but that creates interest in medical procedures. It builds vocabulary. And I would not use that with my own kids, but there are things where if I want people introduced to the trades, I can do that. I even put a legal one in here. You can run your own law firm with Do I Have a Right? Here's the thing, a little customer comes in, they have a problem, you need to decide which lawyer to give that problem to, and your lawyers have specializations in each of the 10 bills of rights. Why memorize the Bill of Rights when you can play it and all your kids have learned it by the end of playtime? If it's in the core mechanic, they can learn it without kind of painful rote memorization techniques. A few hours of Do I Have a Right and you've memorized the 10 bills, because all you're doing is reading a real life situation and assigning it to a lawyer. If you mess up, your customer gets all mad and they lose their case and your law firm's reputation goes down. Again, they reward try it and fail, but if you get it right, your reputation goes up, your lawyer brought money in, you can use that money to hire more lawyers, but you have to know when to reject a case and when to take a case based on who you have on your lawyer team. That's the core mechanic of a law firm. They have the same thing for Diner Dash if you want to learn how to wait tables, right? The whole game is what a waiter does and trying to keep a good rotation as you're doing things in a restaurant. It's a very stressful game and it moves faster and harder as you go through it. But if you want an introduction to waiting tables, it's a great thing to do before you actually go apply for that job and try it. And then you got to teach them not to say to in the interview, well, I've played Diner Dash. No, it's not the real thing, but it is an introduction to those ideas. Here's maturing. I can go from the elementary middle school game and I can jump to findlaw.com very easily as an educator. Okay, now you've played it in the game mode, let's do it for real. So you're all going to go to findlaw.com. I'm going to give you a real life situation. You tell me the case law. Supreme Court just came out with 5 new rulings today. Let's go to findlaw.com. Let's read. We're going to break up into small groups. You each get these cases. Teach them to read law. Do you know how important that is today, especially for Christians? Everyone needs to learn how to read case law. Everyone needs to know how to read a law. It's not rocket science, and it's not harder than what you see on the standardized tests. Honestly, lawyers are very good writers. Most of law school is learning how to write well and how to read good writing. So understanding that will equip them. But think of the number of schools or the number of people that graduate high school, they've never read a law. They've never looked at it. One must ask, why in the government system do they never open up a legal book in 13 years of school? Don't make that mistake. Teach your kids how to read the law. And then some of you might be saying to yourself, but I don't know how to read the law. Learn with them, side by side. Teach them what learning looks like. And learn with them and go, I have never read a Supreme Court case law. My wife, it's like her part-time hobby. This is my wife in the back, by the way. That's Stephanie. And she's amazing. So if you have questions, she probably has better answers than I do. In fact, I've stolen half of these answers from her, just to be full disclosure. I mean, this is something you do for fun, just because you like reading it. And she has her favorite justices on the Supreme Court. She has her least favorite justices on the Supreme Court based on their writing ability and what they're looking at. So if you have a kid that's struggling with writing, don't be decomposing sentences. Show them case law, examples of good writing. Show them great literature and books and what they're doing in that. So now the part you've all been waiting for. What's coming? I think there's things coming that we're going to have to deal with as educators, and part of coming to any kind of summit or professional development is I just want to plant some seeds as to what's now becoming mainstream that you will have to address in the next few years. Let's not be caught off guard by this, but let's be thoughtful, discerning people, seeking the matter out and bouncing it against the Word of God. So here's one, you've seen this, it's called virtual reality. This is the clunkiest thing we've got right now as to what's coming down the pipeline. These tools and devices will get easier to use. They have tried, but they took them off the market to create Google glasses. Did you see these? Anybody get any? I got to do this. Julie, you're nodding your head. You tried those? They came in a little cardboard box. Primary problem with them is they ran out of juice too quick. But I could have glasses on that put information boxes over all of your heads. Facial recognition, search online, who is Angela sitting right here? And it would tell me, and I could then click on you or whatever, and it would read my eye, track my eye movement. It was very complex technology, but the main problem was that they just couldn't fit a battery in here. And so this, the main thing they're doing here, is this is big enough to take your whole field of vision, but they can put glasses to where it still looks like I'm in the room, but they can map things onto the room. There is a whole set of science fiction novels and TV shows that are waiting to be written around virtual reality. At what point do I lose connection with reality when I'm in virtual reality? How does that look? What does that look like? A primary problem with these is people running into walls and hurting themselves badly because you get caught up in the game and you hit things or you swing things. Try playing tennis in a virtual reality game and you're eventually going to hurt yourself. And so they're having a lot of issues with that. But it's moving. As they mature this technology, they'll start creating safety around it. I'm going to move off of virtual reality pretty quick because I'm guessing in schools we're just not doing a lot of this, right? Okay, this is interesting, and you will start to see this come into schools. This is brain-computer interface, BCI. It is known technology. It works. It is making massive leaps and bounds even in the last year, massive. This will quickly be mainstream. It will be cheap and affordable, and I'm going to show you how that works. The tools, this is what I would call invasive, but the tools are getting less and less invasive to the point where they're going to be moving towards things that are easily wearable on your head and on your face. Brain-computer interface puts a direct link between your thoughts and the computer. No joystick, no awkward controllers, no gyrometers, but just straight up, you think it, the computer is able to read the thought. How does that even work? There is a point where technology starts to feel like magic. And if you've played with BCI, I have, it does feel a little like magic. And it's creepy as heck because you're like, how did it know that I was thinking that and doing that? It's very complex technology. It also does not take a lot of materials, which makes it a high profit industry. So every major computer company is investing millions, if not billions, into BCI right now. And so AI is the big open market conversation. BCI is fascinating, and they're pouring as much money into BCI as they are into AI. And so here's where this works. A closed loop BCI technology right now, think that, like, you know when Edison, okay, here's electricity, we've nailed it down. A couple decades went by, and then they're like, you know what? We could use electricity to do our laundry. And Edison started General Electric because he's like, I can use electricity to make a phone. I can use electricity to make an audio recording. I can use, and he's just like, how many things can we apply this technology to? And electricity is very simple, and it changed the culture, right? Okay, we're in that era with BCI right now. There are companies going, okay, in how many ways can we apply this? Because this is so useful. The clapper for years was the most incredible technology we had. Clap on, clap off. That is very simple technology. BCI uses the same, it's built on the same technology. But instead of doing clap on, clap off, you just think lights on. And it reads you and the lights come on. So there, again, it's like the Edison era of electronics. How many hundreds, thousands of ways can we apply BCI to our lives? Because the more apps we put into that first set of mass market tools, it's going to be like the iPhone. The more people will spend on it. So Apple was built on the iPhone. You could say, well, it existed before. No, no, no. It became the megalith that it is now because of the iPhone. When we first saw that, if you're old enough, it was like, whoa, a cell phone and a calculator and it's a music player. I mean, that's what they sold it on, is it had 3 different technologies in one. BCI, it's everything in one. It's anything you can think can be interacting with a computer. Right now at the stage where it's just on-off switches, but this becomes very interesting. Why go through just the brain, right? This is how they're thinking. Why not skip the brain and just go straight to the thing? So BCI prosthetics are really interesting. They have a talk show where the lady just unclicks her arm, puts it on the table. Have you seen this, Julie? And they're like, can you make your arm move when it's not attached? And she's like, sure, because it's wireless technology. How common is wireless right now? So she puts the arm on the table, and then she says, okay, now watch this. And she starts making the hand move across the table. Horror show creepy, but on the other hand, she picks it up, she puts it back on. If you don't have a limb and they can give you your limb back, wouldn't you take that opportunity? So this idea of doing it, not only that, this can be linked to AI very easily. So if I think sandwich, my hand starts going to the fridge and starts making a sandwich without even my thought. So it can kind of automate the whole process in the same way that your brain does. Well, I've brushed my teeth 1,000 times. I don't even think about it anymore. I just brush my teeth. Well, this is the same thing. I can just think toothpaste, and then my hands just start doing it, and because they've done it over and over and over again, the AI can recognize how I brush my teeth and just take care of it. I've been given a time check, so and I'm very close to done, Danny. Thank you for that. This is how this will get presented or sold. Oh my goodness, it is live. It wasn't working before.
A brain-computer interface is a device that senses brain activity, specifically your intention to move your hand, and sends that information out of the head and gets translated so that it can drive a computer. The combination of Barrow and Neuralink was an ideal match because you have one of the best and most trusted brands in neurosurgery coming together with one of the leading companies in neurotechnology, and together the powers of both are just enormous. We started learning about it.
I'll mute him. I think it's important to see him because he has a nice white coat on, and you realize they're actually producing videos to sell this right now. Like, that's how solid the technology, it works just fine. But it is using, right now, the primary funding for it is coming through health insurance because obviously if I can go in and say I need Neuralink or I need some kind of thing, then they can charge hundreds of thousands of dollars for the system. So technology tends to get cheaper over time. It is pretty incredible that humans are figuring out how to replace hands and legs. They can bypass the auditory system and just put images right in the head. Some of you as Christians are thinking, this is exciting medically, but this is also incredibly creepy. Right now, BCI is largely taking what's in the human brain and moving it out to digital systems. That's one way. They are actively working on two-way. And when they figure out two-way, they're very excited. What is two-way? Something happens in a computer that makes me think a thought. Why learn history if I can just put the encyclopedia in my head? If you've ever seen The Matrix, they have a scene where they plug in and they're trying to teach him how to fight, and he's like, well, I'll take all the martial arts. And it just goes upload, and it puts the thoughts into the head. This is the science fiction version ahead of time of what they're trying to build. So that's the piece. Again, my goal wasn't to morally judge these things. I just, as a workshop, like, we should know this is out there. These should be conversations with our kids. Do believers plug themselves into computers that other people have programmed? Do believers plug themselves into computers that are fueled by AI, which is the collective thinking of all humanity? Do we do that? How do we operate? What if it gives us a significant disadvantage in the workplace because I don't have all of human history plugged into my head? Maybe this becomes a job requirement in some fields. You want to go to medical school? That's great. Plug in the medical journals too so you stay updated. And that these could be requirements for people. There are, if not in the United States, there are countries that are moving forward on this incredibly fast. And our administration right now has doubled down that they want to invest in AI. When you hear them say that, they're also investing in BCI. It's virtually the same funding stream for that sort of thing. Massive topic. I hope this is a lot for this afternoon. AI is everywhere, I'll point that out, and AI is popping up in education too. So there's the scary part of AI, but let's also, just for 2 minutes and then we'll kind of wrap up, there's some amazing resources that save us a ton of time as teachers. I can go into ChatGPT, I can take a chapter of a book, pop it in there and say, make me a study guide, make me a worksheet, give me conversation questions to go with this. And I can streamline my teacher prep incredibly quick. Obviously, I can edit that when it's done. Research and support, the statistics that you saw this morning, not that hard to put together with the use of AI. It'll go out and do all that. It's like having a graduate assistant bringing information back to you very easily. Images and maps, why wait for other people to make them when you can learn how to make them yourself? If these are tools that help in the workplace, well, I want charts, maps, and graphs. Like, I can just tell AI, make me a chart around this idea. The line graphs you saw in this morning's presentation, AI generated. Take this set of data, make me a line graph. And that's the command that I give to the AI. Yeah?
So one really interesting thing would be to teach people to write prompts. So many people don't know how to write prompts. And again, we talked earlier about Socratic method. It's learning how to ask a question. Yes?
Yeah, and AI is really good because if you don't ask a detailed enough question, it gives you back garbage. And you're like, oh, I meant this and that, and you get better at asking your questions. You can also condition your school's AI. So most AI systems, you can say, here and forevermore, I never want you to look at this journal. Please only do research from these journals. So you can actually put conditions on your school's AI that limit what the AI will access for resources. So you can say, when asking questions about faith, I only want you to search out resources within these 3 denominations. And you can limit the AI's search functions and information gathering systems. Idea generation. Hey, write me a sample conversation between 2 people trying to find their way to a pirate treasure. And it'll write the chapter for you. Very, very quickly, very fast. So especially with like writing skills, here's another thing I can do. I can take a student's paper if they give it to me digitally. I can copy all, paste it into AI and say, give me 3 suggestions to make this passage more professional or more humorous. So you can actually take a student's writing sample and show them a humorous update, a more serious update, a ironic update, and the AI will convert their writing and show you where they made changes. So even beyond just like, hey, help me with my grammar and my spelling, But you can have students using AI to check their own work and check their own writing samples. And in that, learning how to write better when they do it. Because if I look at the collective writing of the world and I gather that together, I actually do have some, AI can generate some really good pieces. That said, and this is my last piece, please don't assign writing assignments and think that you're going to get the students' work all of the time. That era is over. Here's your essay you need to write. Half of your students will use AI. They'll edit it a little bit so it's their own work, and nobody can challenge them on it. And they say, well, they've got software where you can check if they're using AI. Not if they do just a little bit of editing, and your kids will figure that out. It's just a matter of time. If you want to know what a kid's learned, we're moving into an era where educators need to do oral feedback. You have to have a conversation if you want to know what's in their head. And even at that, if they're doing BCI, they might be cheating by using BCI feeds. Can you imagine what's going to happen to standardized tests when they figure that stuff out? Like, how do you even police that? Especially when the technology looks like a in-ear like amplifier. What do you call those? Earbud. An earbud? Like, yeah. So for deaf and hard of hearing, you would have it, like the technology won't look a lot different. And so they'll just have BCI helping them with their tests, and you'll have this group of people that score perfect scores on their tests. But if you're still doing essays and whatnot, you either have to watch them write it by hand, or you have to assume that a certain percentage of your students will put your prompt into AI, get a well-written essay out of the other end, and then just say, customize it for everything you've seen me do in the past. And it'll actually make it sound like that student's writing, if they're smart, and some of your students are very smart. I hope that helps. I hope that's a blessing. I'll shamelessly plug, we're about a month away from Play More becoming a book. And this is all part of one of the chapters in that book where we talk about just how to make learning more playful across the board. So that was my shameless plug. So there you go.
We had Becky online. She said that last year one of her parents had ALS, and if it weren't for AI, so she's in a hybrid situation. If it weren't for AI, that child's mom wouldn't have been able to homeschool her, but she was able to with AI.
That's incredible. I'm going to come down so I'm not up over you. I'm uncomfortable with the stage setting, but we're going to shift over. Let's take a few minute break, and then we have until 2:30